Today we're going to make leather boxes. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the learning community where anyone can discover, take, or even teach a class. I'll tell you more about this at the end of the video. To make the frames for the boxes, I chose some scrap lumber that I happen to have already. I used my chop saw to cut a couple of 2x4s and a 2x3. My small chop saw wasn't quite big enough to cut through a 2x6, so I used a circular saw instead. I used a belt sander to round over the edges on each of the pieces. I then switched to the orbital sander and a higher grit sandpaper to give it a smoother finish. I cut 1-inch strips of 1/2-inch plywood to use as a bracer that would connect the two pieces of 2x material. I then cut the plywood to length with my chop saw. To notch out the back of the 2x material to fit the plywood, I clamped the two pieces together, marked out 1-inch gap, and then set my circular saw blade to a 1/2-inch depth. I then made several passes through the wood, broke off most of the leftovers, and then cleaned it up with a chisel. The fit was still a little bit too tight, so I hand sanded all the pieces until they fit together perfectly. I pre-drilled through the plywood before attaching it to the 2x material with screws. I then did a light hand sanding of the end of the plywood so that it would match up with the rounded edges of the 2x. I punched one hole on each side of the top of the piece of leather. I used those holes as a template to mark where I wanted to pre-drill into the 2x material underneath. I then glued the leather to the wood and secured it with screws. Once the glue had fully dried, I trimmed off the excess leather using my Kiwi cutting tool. For one of the boxes, I cut small leather rounds and glued magnets inside them to keep the lid closed. I pre-drilled holes through the plywood brace before attaching it to the wall. The smallest one could be attached directly to the wall. But to put them all together, I used a stud finder before attaching a board to the stud and then screwing the boxes into the board. For more detailed information, check out our website. This was my first leatherworking project, and I learned some of the basics from the courses I took on Skillshare.com. Skillshare has more than 10,000 classes on all sorts of useful subjects. I searched for leatherworking classes and found several that are just right for beginners. Classes are divided into video chapters, which make it easy to focus on just the pieces of knowledge that are useful to you. You can use the comment section to ask the instructor questions or share tips and ideas with the other students. To find out more about Skillshare, click on the link in the description box of this video. And subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.